members Grenlund, Fox, and Gotcho.
And we are now live on YouTube. It's your meeting now, Mr. Beagle. Let me know if you need anything.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome everybody to the special city council meeting. It's a virtual Zoom meeting for Michigan Executive Order 2020-75, scheduled for Tuesday, June 9th at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Mayor Beagle,
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Here.
Councilmember Behrman,
Here.
Councilmember Gotcho,
Here.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Here.
Councilmember Sharp,
Here.
Councilmember Smiley,
Here.
quorum present.
Thank you. City Manager Brown, do we have any changes or additions to the agenda as presented tonight?
I have none planned, sir.
Any from the dais? All right, seeing none, it's the first call to the public. Rules of the call to the public are as follows. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included in the agenda immediately after correspondence and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council. All councils by the public shall be made directly to the council. And again, the rules for the virtual meeting are if you're online on a computer, there's a raise your hand feature that you will use. And if you're on your telephone, you press *9. Do we have any comments from the public right now?
Again, Mr. Beagle, that keypad feature is *9 for the callers that are on the line right now. And at this point, I see no virtual hands raised.
Very good. And with that, I'll close the first call to the public and I'll move into new business. First item of new business during this meeting tonight is a discussion of the fiscal action plan for the fiscal year of 2020-2021. It's the discussion about the fire department and the addressing of the staffing gaps that are existing at the fire station. City Manager Brown, you want to take over or you want Chief Roberts to start?
Well, we'll start off with just a brief introduction for me. The June 4th memo for me addressed the fact that we had prepared a new package addressing that goal of closing fire department staffing gaps. It spelled out the staffing gaps that exist in that memo that are mixed between Monday through Friday time periods as well as weekend periods. And then it goes on to talk about that we had revisited two different primary alternatives in a little bit greater detail than we had previously and some new detail, a split between full-time and part-time staff add-ons and a part-time staff shift work kind of arrangement. So that's the item that's really before us for your discussion this evening. And just to clarify something up front too, that I wanted to make mention of when we discussed this previously, we were preparing for this meeting. It was determined that we were going to proceed with the fire department budget as a status quo budget, regardless of what kind of discussion we have at this meeting because of the timing of things. And then we would address it as decisions get made in the future once we get into a new fiscal year. So that's the overview that I will provide, and then I will turn it over to Marilyn Stamper, actually our finance director, for her to go through the package of information that we provided. And Fire Chief Roberts is obviously here as well, who will do a lot of the speaking as we discuss this issue, but we'll begin with Marilyn.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to bring up the presentation that you have in your packet. Okay, so a lot of this is very similar to what you saw back in January. We updated some of the numbers to reflect the new budget that we have on the agenda at the next meeting tonight. But the first page that was in your packet, basically that shows the summary from our current budget for 2021 that shows our revenue expenditures as they stand without any changes that we're discussing tonight in this meeting. What that would show is this first page would show that our current budget that we're adopting here, we have just over 200,000 revenue over expenditure. So we're adopting a budget tonight that has approximately 200,000 additional revenue coming in. which will come into play when we're looking at some of those cost scenarios in the future pages. This particular page, I'm showing going forward with a millage drop next year. If for some reason our millage on the next ballot in November doesn't go through, that would show what our picture looks like here across the center of the page that's highlighted there. That would be our expenditure over revenue without a millage in November. So that's really what this page shows you, is what we look like revenue over expenditure in those scenarios. So the next page is simply just a millage calculation or tax revenue calculation to then where I get those tax revenues from to carry over to those other pages. This shows in 2021 what our current tax revenue is on the general fund side. And then we show that decrease across those next years if we do not have that millage increase. So we have that, that's why we show that decrease in revenue. The next page shows a little better light if we do have a renewal of that up to 3.5 mils. And what I did here is obviously next year number stays the same of the just under 200 or just over 200,000. With that additional, I calculated a full 3.5 mils for those future years just to show best case scenario. We would have 807 approximately of additional revenue over expenditures. The next year it starts to decline because we see that DDA repayment that we're currently getting, we see a decline in that revenue. So that shows our revenue over expenditure starting to dwindle a bit. And then this next page, this again is simply the tax revenue calc based on that renewal of the 3.5 mils going forward and where I'm pulling those numbers from. The next pages, 2 pages are basically the fire budget as was proposed and what's on the adoption tonight as is for the total of 1.214781. So that's just simply a visual of what their current budget looks like. This next page is where we get into some of those calculations of staffing scenarios. This first one is looking at a full-time staffing scenario for more of the hours at the fire department, which would include additional 3 full-time firefighters and then additional part-time to staff the other gaps that exist in fire department coverage. So I've summarized those here at the top. This scenario would include a full-time rotating schedule 7 days a week of a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 2 persons per shift. Those would be full-time employees covering those shifts, that shift 7 days a week. Part-time, we would have 2 persons per shift covering weekends 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then also weekday 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. And what that is doing is that 6 p.m. to 10 p is currently a gap in coverage or a gap in personnel being at the fire station. That would cover that gap in shift with part-time personnel. So the cost for that or related to that in next fiscal year 2021 would be approximately $258,000 of additional expenditure. What I did, because obviously at this point, we missed the deadline for the SAFER grant. So a SAFER grant would not be able to come into play until fiscal year 21-22. This would be the percentage that we would receive back from a SAFER grant if it were awarded in those 3 years. It's a 75% the first year, 75 the second year, and 35 the third year. But again, the SAFER grant only comes into play if you are hiring new personnel. So that any new personnel would have to be delayed until 21-22 in order to take advantage of a SAFER grant on the full-time status, because it has to be newly hired personnel in order to get that. So that's the cost on full-time. This next page shows basically the staffing model. For a typical weekday, hiring 3 new full-time. During this first part of the day from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., there would be 4 staff, which would be comprised of 4 full-time personnel. At 10 a.m., we would have 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., we would have 5 staff members because we have our 5th full-time person that comes in at 10 o'clock. So you would have 5 members of staff until 2 p.m. From 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., we would have 3 full-time staff members. And then from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. the next morning, that would come into play the 2 part-time personnel that would be on shift. The weekend's a little bit simpler, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 2 full-time shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. the next morning, 2 part-time shift that would be covering those shifts. We looked at what possibly our additional staffing we would need to hire to cover these shifts. We would need a minimum of an additional 4 personnel, which would be 3 full-time and 1 part-time to cover these shifts. And at a maximum 7, which would be 3 full-time and 4 part-time.
The other thing I'd like to add on that model, if you look at the part-time staff, they're scheduled for a 12-hour shift there because they're working the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Area of time, or 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. essentially, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. being a part-time shift, and then 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. being another shift for them. It's a 12-hour shift model there. That's going to be a little bit different from the next model, which the chief can go into a little bit of detail when we get there.
And so the next page, this shows the cost information for a part-time staffing model. And what this does is provides 2 persons per shift on the weekend shifts from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And those are the current gaps in coverage at the station that we currently have. As for the weekdays, it would cover the 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. gap and the 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. gap during those weekdays, 2 persons per shift. And then also we included in here to add in coverage of part-time from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays. That was an additional 4 hours per day on the part-time model for weekdays that we changed from what we saw back in January. So January didn't include having a part-time person during those hours. The reason that was added was to then run 2 8-hour shifts instead of a 4-hour and an 8-hour shift. Because it was determined in some discussions that in this model, it would be ideal to run 8-hour shifts as opposed to a 12-hour shift overnight on that part-time. So what that did is it brought the fiscal year 2021 estimate up to about 158,000. And then I run that across with general increases that we do for other personnel also. So this shift model is a little bit different than what we saw back in January due to that additional coverage of 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And I don't know if there's any questions on that at this point.
Marilyn?
Want me to keep going?
I've got one question if I can, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, go ahead.
And a SAFER grant is not eligible for non-FTEs or non-full-time equivalent, correct? Part-time, you're not eligible for a SAFER grant, is that correct?
Correct, full-time only.
Full-time only.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Sure, then go ahead, Councilmember Greenland Fox.
So just a couple questions, Marilyn. You had said that the thought was the 8 hours instead of the 12 hours.
Mhm.
What was the rationale for that?
I think I'll let Jeff and Steve speak on that behalf.
Okay.
Jeff, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here. You got me?
Yep, we got you.
All right. So the first one, there is both models are present. You have basically 4 8-hour shifts, as we talked about, and then there's the 12-hour shift model. So both exist. I think maybe some confusion is one of them utilizes full-time personnel from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then the part-time people or our current paid on call would work the 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that was the very first version that Marilyn pointed out. At no point in time have we proposed part-time staffing for 24 hours, if that's the question. So I guess the culture or history that may need to be important here is originally there were no full-time people at the fire department other than the fire chief. Subsequently, several years ago, we added a fire marshal, which became a full-time position. And then as recently as 3 years ago, we added 2 additional full-time people during the daytime because we do not see part-time people available from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'm not telling you no one comes in during those times, but very, very, very few people are available to respond to their pager between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. because they're either getting ready to go to their full-time employment or they're not home yet from that full-time employment. Remember, every member of our fire department has a full-time job working outside their community that pays their bills. This is a part-time job only for them.
Have we ever thought about, I know we have the fire marshal is a separate position. We have, it looks like, training, one person that does training or something, and then one firefighter, and then one inspector, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so has there ever been any thought about having both of those individuals be inspectors and they could both work shift? And then do the inspections on the, when in the free time?
So the only challenge I think that I see with what you're asking me is 2 people can't do the work 7 days a week. We could do that, but we're only going to get 50% of that coverage from those individuals.
As far as the inspections you're talking?
Nope, not talking about the inspections at all. Assuming that they're going to do inspections along with saving lives, going to fire calls, etc., they still can't work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. So how do we get the 24 hours of coverage with just 2 people?
Sure. No, I guess I was thinking if they work 12-hour shifts and say they worked Monday through Thursday, you'd still have to supplement for time off and injuries and that kind of thing with part-time staff, which I understand is right now is a challenge. And then perhaps on the weekends or at nights, then you have scheduled shifts for those part-timers instead of just tone outs, because then they would know what they're going to work and they could schedule that ahead of time.
Part of the problem, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Part of the problem is, as Marilyn has pointed out, we've figured out how many shifts each paid on call or part-time employee could work without becoming a full-time equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
And you're limited to how many shifts those individuals could work, or where they're going to be equivalent to a full-time employee and we're going to have to give them benefits as well. So we have that challenge too. We have more hours than we can cover with the people we have to work these weekends and nights. That's why we're where we're at currently.
Sure. Which is why the recruitment plan is so important, I think. So in these shifts that you have, that Marilyn went over, do you have anything that shows your calls for service and when your calls for service are increased? There's usually, a time throughout the day that calls for service are heavier and other times that they're lighter. I didn't see that in this, but I'm guessing you have a chart that shows your calls for service.
That was presented to council back in January. We did not resend that out to my knowledge.
Okay, so this staffing that you've proposed here, or these various proposals, that takes into consideration the need based on the calls for service?
Absolutely. So just a little bit more history there for you, if you don't mind. Typically, we see a double, 50% increase, or I should say 100% increase, sorry, of calls for service during the 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's often assumed that the population doubles because we have so much industry, commercial enterprise in the city currently. So that's why that 8 to 4, 9 to 5 has always been a challenge, because of the activities that are going on in the city over the years. We were 1,378 calls for service, I believe, last year from memory. And those calls, for the most part, the lion's share, if you will, of those calls came in during the business day.
And what types of calls for service are those typically? They're medicals typically?
So 85% of our calls are medically related, absolutely. About 11% of those calls are car wrecks, and then the remaining 3% are fire related.
Does that include like false alarms and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have right now. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Marilyn, you want to continue, please?
Looks like Peter might have a question.
Yep, I did. Go ahead, Councilmember Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess before we got the agenda, I went back and looked at the packet from January, and I accepted in my own mind that I was comfortable with us doing the part-time model that was proposed then, with an additional $110,000 per year. And I'm not quite sure wrapping my mind around why we need to go from the 110,000 proposal to the 158,000 proposal. I guess, I know you put way more effort into this than what I'm thinking, but why not, if I'm looking at the full-time proposal, you have part-time people working from 10 or 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. But why can't we do that, the same thing, and have part-time people working from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.? That would save the 4 hours of overlap, and then you'd be back down at the 110,000 that was proposed in January, and I think I could get behind that moving forward. But can you convince me, or at least explain to me, why we would need to spend the additional $40,000 to $50,000 to have the overlap from 2 to 5?
If that's a question for me, sir.
I would assume probably.
Okay. Yeah. So I think what you have to realize is we've made some assumptions. We have to make assumptions when you're making projections, because we don't have absolutes. And those assumptions are, we're going to, once we throw the switch, if you will, just start fighting people off with a stick that want to work for us part-time. And that assumption, in my opinion, is very, very not likely, unlikely, less likely. And I tell you that is because these staffing proposals are being attempted or have been attempted by other communities. And they've either been somewhat successful or less than successful. And that's why they've gone away from certain things like responding to the pager. We continued to try and make the system work when we knew our number was dropping rapidly and our calls for service were going up. One of the reasons why some of our members went away was because they could no longer contribute at the level we needed them to, and life gets ahead of you sometimes. So the assumption is we are not going to find too many people to work 4-hour shifts. So extending the 8 to 12 in some cases might be challenging, but to supplant that, if you will, with full-time members, it would allow less shifts per member per week, allowing them the opportunity to come when we need them, but give them that relief.
So the 12-hour shifts would be covered by full-time people and the 8-hour shifts are just part-time? I guess that's where
In one model, remember there's two separate models you're looking at. One model would be full-time members working 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., which is the challenge we see today getting part-time or paid on-call members. And then from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., we would just extend the people that are working now an additional 4 hours. But they would have less shifts per week.
Right.
So the other model is basically 4 8-hour shifts, utilizing the current full-time
Three
with
8-hour shifts.
additional part-time members or paid on call, which we don't have. They don't exist. They're not currently in the queue waiting to come to work. We have to publish, look for, identify, go through the hiring process, and execute.
Right, and
So-
the key change under that model would have to be when you have it established as a full 8-hour shift, the 3 8-hour shifts that we have. When you have it established as a full 8-hour shift and a regularly scheduled 8-hour shift, you could also expand your net of looking for paid on-call firefighters, essentially, to include people that live substantially outside of the area because they won't have the challenge of responding to the tones, right?
Right.
So if I live an hour away, I can't serve as a paid on-call firefighter for Wixom right now because of what's required, A, in the contract, and B, in reality, because we can't tell the fire to hold off for an hour while somebody drives into work to respond to a scene. But if you have it on a shift work kind of basis, you could have somebody from Troy or somewhere else that could become a firefighter for the city of Wixom, and they would just have to incorporate their drive time to get there for whatever shift they work, right? They're not responding to an on-call need for service kind of thing. They're responding to a shift. So that would be the change in personnel that would be a change in our paradigm and our way of doing business and allow us to potentially have a greater pool of people to draw from and therefore a greater number of people that would be willing to work for us.
I guess that was my question. Why can't you make that a 12-hour shift instead of a 4-hour shift that has overlap?
It's harder to get people to work 12-hour shifts that are part-time employees. The
Oh,
same
it-
reason
Yeah.
I don't want to work 12 hours a day. Nobody else does either.
And typically with these people, they would have another job. Maybe they would allow them the flexibility to come in and, maybe they're a full-time employee in another department potentially where they've got 2 24-hour shifts, but that leaves 5 days a week they could work for us. Maybe they'd be willing to come in for an 8-hour shift. Maybe they'd be willing to come in for a 12-hour shift, but we chose the 8-hour shift model, the 3 8-hour shifts, as opposed to the 2 12-hour shifts. Partially for what the fire chief was just referencing.
But currently, we don't know if either of these will work because we don't have anybody in the pipeline that would want to do any of them until we start hiring people.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
until we establish ourselves, that's going to be a key thing, right? If we establish that we're going to try to commit to this kind of a staffing model or that kind of a staffing model, that's when you'll have the opportunity to begin that recruiting campaign and try to attract the number of people that you need. If you look at the bottom of each schedule, it talks about the number of employees, additional employees that are needed. The total difference in employees between the two models is pretty mild, pretty narrow. But the difference in part-time employees is a little bit larger. So that's where you would require more part-time employees by a greater number when you compare that partial full-time, partial part-time with the full part-time schedule, if you will, or the full paid on-call schedule, if you will.
Either way, as Mr. Brown pointed out, it's going to require having a memo of understanding with the union, which will have to take place at some point in time prior to hiring.
Right. There would be contract addressing that would have to take place and get agreed to.
But the members of the union want this. I mean, they've been the ones that have been coming to our meetings telling us they want it to be full-time, correct?
Well, I think they want to come, they want to see 24-hour coverage. I don't think they have ever stated, in my mind anyways, what proposal they're endorsing. I don't know if they have.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they've endorsed a proposal, and I don't think they're proposing it. Their concern is they're just concerned, they're not only fire staff members, but they're also citizens of this city. And their concern is that we have gaps in our coverage that is not allowing us to fully provide a functioning service to the city at times. And they just want to see it taken care of, and the citizens getting a full staff 24-hour 7 fire department in case there's an emergency. That I don't think they've ever said one way or another what they want. They know that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. Correct, Chief Roberts?
Oh, that's how I see it as well. Yes.
Yeah, I misspoke. I meant full-time coverage, not full-time employees.
Yeah, because I don't think anybody wants a full-time, a fire department. We just want full coverage 24/7. Are we good, Councilmember Berman?
I mean, I agree. I want full-time coverage. I like I said before, I'm comfortable with 110,000. I'm still not quite sold that we need the overlap in the other 40, but regardless, I'd like to get to a consensus so we can have some full-time coverage one way or another.
And I will mention, now that I brought up this screen, showing that overlap of that 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. that we added in.
For members.
Would that allows 4 members in the station during that time period, and actually 4 members from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., which are typically the time that, from what I understand from Chief Roberts, is the harder time to have those other responders coming in to calls during the day when they're at their other jobs. So that provides not just 2 full-time personnel for that time gap, but it brings in those part-time personnel to provide 4 individuals in the station during those busier times of the day that other members don't respond because they're at their other jobs. So that was part of that logic also, was to not leave 2 members during the week in the station during those times, to also provide that additional coverage.
Councilmember Grenlin Fox?
Thank you. I had a question regarding the SAFER grant. I know a little bit about the SAFER grant. I'm sure not as much as you do, Chief Roberts, but my understanding is there's some requirements on hours, how many hours the department works. How many hours do our full-time firefighters work?
Currently, all of our full-time firefighters only work 37.5 hours a week.
Okay. Do you know what the requirement is for the SAFER grant?
I believe it's a 56-hour model, but I don't know that it specifies. It definitely covers hours, because it doesn't cover any overtime.
Right.
So
Right.
depending on what staffing model you propose or you have them work, the city would absorb the additional amount.
Right, and in the full-time model, the 3 new hires and one of the existing firefighters would increase from 37.5 hours to, I can't remember what that number was, Chief Roberts, do you recall? Because they would not be working 37.5, I believe they'd be working.
Yeah, so they would
48.
They would work what, 3 12s one week and I think 4 the next. And
Okay.
It would mirror what the police officers work, only for a 12-hour day, not 24 hours.
Yes.
Which is
So-
part of the additional cost.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Do we have any other questions, or can we move on and finish this and then get into a discussion some more about this, and everyone can voice their opinion?
I'm trying to get a question in here.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Smiley.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This kind of goes back to Councilman Behrman's, his concern. And I've heard Chief Roberts state this tonight, and I'm sure in the past as well. And we had a message from Steve Brown today, saying that basically the $110,000 budget version of all of this, without rehashing it, is unrealistic. It's not something that we think we can make happen. And the 148,000 is better. So first of all, Chief Roberts, first question is, do I have that right? And two, is the $158,000 budget version of this, does that work? Is that got a lot of compromise in it as well?
Well, I think with what Marilyn's sharing with you right now, you're going to see that 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. with part-time staff or a paid on-call member is the challenge. In this configuration, the person just isn't likely to be available, right?
Right, for the bigger budget version?
Right, correct.
The first one or the second one?
So
The second one's got its worries.
You're right with the 158, much more user-friendly, if you will. But again, it makes some assumptions that there would be somebody available attractive to that proposal at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Is it reality? I can't answer that. To give you some historical perspective, again, I think the mayor and the deputy mayor have both alluded to this at times. When Ford Motor Company failed to provide a second shift in Wixom, and the supporting car town business went away with it, we lost that second shift. Those people, much like myself, when I was working afternoons, I was available during the daytime often, and we've lost that the ability to attract those individuals. They're not local anymore. So do I think there's a challenge with the 3 or 4 8-hour shifts? I think there is some challenge because we've never tried it. I said, I think people have tried it around us, other communities. It's easier to fill an 8-hour shift by a part-time member, but often, depending on what you're asking that part-time member to do, it's also challenging to get them to fill enough 8-hour shifts to be a benefit. If our bench was stronger, if you will, we could put more players in the game. Right now, our bench isn't very deep.
Well, what would you recommend? Do you have a recommendation as to what to do that's something better than this second version without being full-time, of course? Is there, or we just have to work on recruitment? Is it all boiled down to that?
Well, I think recruitment is important. I think retention's more important, but I think retention, the ship may have sailed for some regards. We've lost 100 firefighters over the last 10 years because they couldn't commit or they went full-time.
Right.
So I believe, my opinion is, a 12-hour full-time staffing model in the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is what we're going to have to look forward to for the foreseeable future. But there will be some point in time where the paid on call just isn't going to be able to commit, or the number is going to be so few that model is going to fail at some point in time as well. But that's what I've been saying for years, honestly. We've passed on 7 opportunities to get a SAFER grant to plan for the future. We used to be very proactive. Thank you very much. And we've become much more reactive lately.
When did we apply for a SAFER grant in the past? I missed it.
Oh, we have not. We
Never.
have not applied. We've had an opportunity. We just never taken advantage of it. The 1 year, Mr. Brown, I believe it's when you came on the job, or as you were coming on the job, we did not qualify because the only people we could have hired, even if we had applied for it, we couldn't have hired because the grant language only allowed someone that had never worked for your community, municipality, in any capacity. The language is such been changed to allow someone that was part-time to become full-time under the SAFER. But we have never actually applied for it, and that's what I was referring to. We've lost the opportunity for years.
Okay.
So the
Thank you.
immediate opportunity before us, I guess, would be, given that I don't think we're going to proceed onto a full-time staffing model, the absent the SAFER grant would be to try to make the shift work change and see how that works out. See if we have an increase in the staffing that we need on the paid on call or part-time firefighters. The math that I was talking about, if you compare the two models, right, the overall staffing in the minimum and maximum range between the full-time hybrid and the fully shift work based model. You look at the total employees, there's a difference of about a difference in 1 on the minimum side and a difference of 2 on the maximum side. But where the difference really comes into play is the part-time or paid on call firefighters, the amount of eggs in that basket, if you will, is much higher under the shift work model than it is on the shift between full-time and part-time. The additional part-time employee count under the minimum staffing is 5, and it's 4 on the paid on call on the minimum level, and then it's 5 on the maximum level. So it's a 4 and 5 additional part-time employees we'd have to attract to make the shift work model work compared to the split between the full-time and the part-time or paid on call firefighters. The overall staffing is not different greatly, but the number of part-time / paid on call firefighters is much greater in the second model than the first. So that's where we would have to rely on having a better result from the shift work model if we could expand, cast a wider net and hopefully pick up those additional employees that we would need. Go further outside our geographic area.
Councilmember Berman?
I remember in January you talking, I think it was Chief Roberts talking or someone else talking about the ability to use employees from other departments to cover these shifts. Would that be a possibility if we approve this budget?
So the assumptions are that these part-time people would be members of another community. They may or may not have a position with the community of another community, I'm sorry. But the idea is that they would already be fully trained, and maybe we would have them for a period of time between now and the time they get full-time employment, because for the most part, people that aren't members of your community, that's what their goal is, to find full-time employment in the field.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else real quick? We got like about 10 minutes left, 10, 12 minutes left on this. Marilyn, do you want to finish this, or do you think we're good with this packet so far with the information, or?
I just have 2 more slides. Those will
Right.
take me pretty quick to go through. There's just general information.
All right.
The next one is just showing the ambulance transport revenue that we receive annually. I did receive the May number from our bank statement, so that 17,000 so far this fiscal year would actually be about 19,500 through May 31st. And then the final schedule is just showing what 1 mil equals based on our taxable value. So currently this coming fiscal year, we're at about 758,000 for 1 mil of taxes. And that was all I had in slides. Do you want me to take my screen share down? Does that make it easier for discussion?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Does anybody have because of the time restraint, does anybody have any questions on the police and fire department recruitment and retention plan? Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Maybe just a couple of comments that I'll make here, because I know we don't have much time, but the fact is we have gaps, and God forbid you have a house fire, let's say 7 or 8 p.m. on a weekday or a weekend, or at 7 a.m. on the weekend, it's going to be a lot harder, right? The second fact is if you're going to get part-timers to commit, you have to have shift work that they can plan in the schedule with their families, with the soccer games, with school, with whatever, right? So, that being what it is, I'm very much in favor of getting to a full coverage model. If we start, with the part-timers and can recruit them because they know they're going to have shift work, let's start there, right? But I know that, I've had to use the services in the last couple of years, and I was lucky. It happened at a time in my house when somebody was on at the station and on staff, and they were here quickly. So with that, I think that we have to do something. And as we build out the rest of Anthem, the rest of Cambridge Estates, the rest of Melania Estates, Stonegate,
Okay.
the rest of these subs that are going in, people are going to vote for a millage if it includes public safety. And that's, been shown historically. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Councilmember Gacho.
Thank you. In looking at does this need to be confined to the recruitment retention? Mayor?
I'm sorry.
Do our comments right now need to be relating to the recruitment and retention plan?
Nope.
Okay.
Just nobody had any questions for that. So we'll go right in, council comments because of the time restraint, and then we'll go on.
All right. So just in terms of the shift work model, I did have some questions. A lot going back to assumptions. Assuming we're hiring existing firefighters with other departments right now to fulfill our model, if we do the shift work recruitment model, looking at what really kind of at the end of all of the projections a few years out makes the difference is the training cost per new hire. Why would we need to be spending $30,000 per new hire if they're existing firefighters, I guess is one of my questions.
Mr. Gotchel, even with new police officers that have come from other communities, to get them acquainted with our equipment, the unique nuances with the breathing air packs, it requires training. And some of them can be trained on a full-time basis, but that requires a full-time member to train them. So you have the cost of their training and the cost of a field training officer working with them, and that's done with some amount of overtime.
And so that's a firm like 30,000 a year per person.
We base the training on the exact same amount that's contractually training the police officers. And again, we had to make some assumptions.
That to me though, depending on how many people we're hiring, that's the make or break number of whether one model is more efficient or less efficient than the other. Because right now, if we go with shift work at the end of the projection, shift work is less costly. But if we go to the full additional or using our current in-house people or more full-time people, that becomes less costly if we're hiring a bunch of people and it is really costing us 30,000 a year. So I guess I would be really concerned about that number because the models make it look similar, but when you start to add in the cost for training, if that's an accurate number, then it makes it less efficient, which isn't helpful. So that's kind of, I would just be curious how many new people we will need to be hiring and if that 30,000 is really going to be completely accurate as that. So it's just, I guess those are the main factors, because even if we go to the full-time model, just as my comments, it's going to go back up to nearly 300,000 the year after the projections that we were provided with for our packet. So even with training, it'll still be probably less, but that's something that, again, we're basing on assumptions, but I would really be interested to know what that is going to cost and how much training we're really going to need.
I think one of the challenges we face in a part-time world, there is never a guarantee that the part-time member is going to stay to give you the true benefit or return on your investment. And without a better retention schedule, much like has been discussed in other budgets where there would be some monetary incentive, those members may become slightly trained, just fully trained, and then take a full-time position outside of our community. So there's always that gamble.
But this isn't talking about schooling necessarily, as some of those discussions have centered around in the past, is that we're paying for their schooling essentially, and then they get what they need out of us and off they go. This seems to be more like field training from one of our current full-time employees.
That's what specifically addressed there. Yes, we would be wanting someone, if we were investing in all their education, to be a member within the umbrella of the format we have currently. But for our district firefighters, someone that would come in fully trained, that is just to integrate them to the Wixom system, doing the reports, understanding how the computers work, the pumps we own, the fire truck, the apparatus, the ambulance, which mirrors what the police officers do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning more toward the shift work model personally right now, as well, similar to the deputy mayor. But I think that's one of the key things that we need to keep an eye on, is how many people are we needing to hire and how much is it really costing us if we do choose to go forward with that version. Thank you.
Real quick, Councilmember Sharp, then Councilmember Berman. We have like about 4 minutes left, correct, Mr. Milburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to
That's correct.
state my support for filling the gaps. I agree with Deputy Mayor Resnick. We're a growing city. We're not out in the countryside anymore. We owe it to our citizens to have full coverage on public safety. I'm not sure it's clear on what the recommendation is from the city manager's office and the fire department on which way is the best way to go. I think we could do a little better job of buttoning up the presentation, presenting a recommendation and the costs associated with that recommendation. And that would give us something really to work from, rather than, I feel like it's kind of being tossed out to council to sort out right now. But it sounds like you've got support to have full-time coverage. What's the best plan? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Berman.
I would just echo that moving forward with the part-time coverage, I think is something we need to do now. Waiting to next year to apply for a SAFER grant is a hope and a prayer and kicking the can down the road some more. So I would rather move forward with 110 or 150 or whatever they need to get the gaps covered now, and hopefully they can get the gaps covered. And then, 10 months from now, 11 months from now, if they're really not able to find anyone, then we can come back and look at whether or not we have to address the full-time coverage, possibly through the SAFER grant, to help offset the cost.
Yeah, and that's my concern too, is, we're one event, my feeling is we're one event away from finding out if we have an efficient fire department or not. And I really don't want that on my time to find out that we didn't. We need to do something. And I would like to do the gap cover, Phil, how we're going to do this. And with the part-time coverage, my only fear is we're kicking it down the road for 6 months. So, we do this for 6 months, we don't find anybody, and then they're coming back to us and they're saying, we couldn't do this plan. Now we got to go to plan B. And by the time we go out and put the applications out and hire and stuff like that, we're 10, 11 months down the road. So it's, what do we do? And if we do the shift work, do we go to we give them 4 months, we give them, what's the timeline that we give them before we have to figure out what our next move is? But I think you've got the support here. We've had some great discussion. We can have some more discussion on it. If you guys would like, we can schedule another meeting, or we can discuss about it at the next council meeting. We can add an item for discussion only, however you guys want to proceed on that. But I know we're getting close on time. I don't know if there's any other call to the public. If there's a call to the public and you've got a quick comment or a question, you can either raise your hand and do a star 9. We have any, Mr. Milburn?
Yes, I'm looking through the list right now, Mr. Mayor. I do not see any virtual hands raised. Again, anybody that is on a traditional telephone, if you press star 9, that will alert us that you would like to speak. We do have a caller, Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Phone number with the last 4 digits of 8728. I will unmute your line. Please state your name and address for the record. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, this is Michael Smith, 1692 Norton Creek, and I'm with the Wixom Firefighters Union. And I just want to say I really appreciate the time you guys spent this evening going over it. The union is ready to work with the city to make sure we fill these gaps and get this coverage. So that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just if you guys want to drop myself email or a text City Manager Brown, if you'd like to continue with another 6 o'clock meeting, or on the next council meeting, we'll do a item for discussion only on that. Let me know how you want to proceed with that. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn the special city meeting?
And real quick, Mr. Mayor, we have no other callers raising their hand at this point.
Okay, very good. So we've got support. Do we have a second to adjourn? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Everybody just mute yourself and take yourself off the screen for a few minutes, and we'll start in about 3 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you. And we are ready to begin whenever you are, Mayor Beagle.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome everybody to the regular city council meeting scheduled for Tuesday, June 9th, 2020. It's a virtual Zoom meeting for Michigan Executive Order 2020-75. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
I'm so
Meeting's
sorry.
canceled.
That's okay.
Mayor Beagle,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Here,
Councilmember Behrman,
Here.
Councilmember Gotcha,
Here,
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Here.
Councilmember Sharp,
Present.
Councilmember Smiley,
Here.
quorum present.
Thank you. Can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag
United
of
States.
the United States of America,
America.
Republic,
and to the republic
which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
Stands
nation,
one nation,
God.
under
God,
God, indivisible,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
all.
Thank you. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda as presented tonight? City Manager Brown?
Yeah, Mayor, I did have one slight change to the agenda that's already been provided to council just a little bit earlier in the day with a change to the unfinished business relating to approval of the fiscal year 2020, 2021 budget. There were a couple of pages that required corrections of a minor nature that we can go into greater detail, but I wanted to point that out that those changes had been made and supplied to council.
Okay. Very good. Any from the dais?
No.
All right, seeing none, we'll open up the public hearing. The public hearing tonight is for the fiscal year 2020-2021 proposed budget public hearing. Rules to the public hearing are as follows. Persons desiring to address the council shall state their name and address. Individual persons shall be allowed 5 minutes to address the council. There'll be no questioning by the audience of persons addressing the council. However, the council members may question persons addressing the council. No person shall be allowed to address the council more than once. And again, since this is a Zoom meeting, if you are on a computer, you can use your raised hand feature to be called on. And if you are on a telephone, you're calling in on a cell phone, press *9 and that will activate the raised hand feature. With that, I'll open up the public hearing and turn it over to City Manager Brown.
So as required by city charter, we're having a public hearing on our proposed budget for adoption of the fiscal year 2021 budget and adoption of the associated resolutions, which is related to what I spoke about earlier. There was a minor correction to reflect one of the feedback items that council had requested that had somehow not been reflected in the package of information. So later on, when we get to the budget, you'll have those pages that have been corrected. Marilyn, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to say at the outset before getting started with the budget highlights. I don't know if you plan to go over that again or if council has a preference to have that covered again or not.
I mean, typically I do go through the budget highlight document again, just to cover some of the highlights and changes and also the millage rate that we're required to discuss during the the public hearing. Sorry about that.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the highlight document.
And if council has any questions, let's, since we're going to share the screen, can we hold off on questions till after the presentation? Thanks.
Okay, so tonight, the document actually will look very similar to what you saw for the preliminary budget with a few minor changes. Just to go over the highlights, the one change we made is this page, which shows the modifications that were made during the budget sessions that we held with City Council at the end of May. We reflected an overall reduction of $4,000 to the general fund budget, as shown by these each individual items that were modified. And as far as the capital fund, we removed the $5,000 for the electric bicycle And then the two items that I do apologize did not get included in the previous document. I had those written on a different page and realized them today. Was to remove the $10,000 for one Adopt-A-Box. And then we bumped forward the sickle tractor attachment for $20,000 that was moved into a future fiscal year. For a total modification of $35,000 to the capital budget for 2021. As for property taxes, we have a 6.46% increase in property taxes, which correlates to approximately $462,987 in additional tax revenue for this fiscal year. Our residential property tax rate increased by 5.85%, commercial by 3.64%, industrial property decreased by 1.39%, and personal property increased by 17.76%. I won't go through the rest of this since it's very similar. It's actually the identical page that we went through when we did the preliminary budget. The next page covers our millage rate, which we are required to discuss during our public hearing. We're looking at an overall millage levy of 11.9458 mils. That reflects a reduction of 1.2574 mils over our last year's millage rate of 13.2032. The main driver of that was the removal of the 1.25 mils for water utility debt millage due to the expiration of that debt payment, and some other slight reductions due to Headley rollback on the other millages that we had. This brings us in as the 8th lowest millage rate in the 31 cities in Oakland County that we look at their data. And other cities range from 8.3212 to 38.3265 on their overall millage. As far as revenue, there was no change during the budget sessions. So we still show a revenue increase of $48,393 or a 0.373% increase over the 2019-20 revenue. And again, I reduce the 19-20 revenue by the budget stabilization contribution that we had made that year, just to bring it to a more realistic number when we're comparing it to this year's revenue, because this year's revenue does not include the budget stabilization contribution. State shared revenue, no change from what we budgeted for in the preliminary budget. We're looking at a, jump to that page, 1,284,910 that is estimated to reduce to 1,139,000 due to the reduced sales tax in April and June. And we had carried through some estimated declines in the upcoming fiscal year. I'm still not sure what that's really going to look like with the COVID-19 effects. Obviously, if we're estimating very conservatively, hoping that it will come in at a better number, but we should be able to meet what we are budgeting for. As far as expenditures, this did change by the $4,000 on the general fund side that were modified during the sessions. So the overall expenditure decrease was increase is $258,952 when compared to the prior budget year. The budget provides funding for our other post-employment benefit cost in the amount of $97,661 and pension funding for the bond of $202,584. The general fund reflects an estimated balance at the close of fiscal year 2021 of $2,566,312 or 27.62% of expenditures. The development across the street in the DDA resulted in increase to captured taxes within the district. Therefore, the DDA is now completely covering their debt payment along with repayment to the city for prior years that we've supplemented that. So we are seeing the total bond payment being covered by the DDA. The budget stabilization fund at the end of fiscal year 2021 would reflect a balance of $1,364,600 I'm sorry, $1,364,666, or a 14.68% of expenditures. And that is with basically the budget stabilization fund just reflects interest earnings on there, no other contributions or expenditures out of there. Full-time positions in this budget reflect 54 full-time employees. And the next page, as you saw in the preliminary budget, just shows what our overall count of full-time employees is currently and how that has changed through the years back to fiscal year 05-06. The solid waste collection rate will be $175 per household. That will be included on the summer tax bill as it had been in the past. And that's direct correlation with our waste management contract that we hold through 2022. Combined sewer and water utility rates will increase from $67.80 per unit to $70.30 per unit, along with meter maintenance and special sewer cost changes. Residential sewer charge cap will change from $126 a quarter to $140.30 a quarter. Residential sewer only customers will increase from $83.50 to $91.75 per quarter. Industrial sewer only customers will increase from $118.25 to $130 per quarter. And then also have mentioned during fiscal year 1920, we had issued capital improvement bonds for the wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $5,375,000 to fund some of those improvements. Next slide, we show we are contributing $980,000 to the capital improvement 10-year program. Our current year expenditures are $2,826,280. It's just higher in this year because we are on that rolling 10-year capital plan. So our contribution annually stays fairly steady, where our expenditures do fluctuate from year to year. Some years are heavier on expenses than others. And this does reflect the $5,000 being taken off in the police department and $30,000 being removed from the public works department. As far as road safety path and water wastewater, our major road improvements, we're budgeting $490,000. Local roads, $345,000, safety path improvements of $529,000, wastewater improvements of $1,519,038, and water improvements of $301,479. And that is all I have for the highlights. I can take this down from screen share if you like, Mayor.
Please. Any council questions or comments at this time? Any questions from the public at this time, Mr. Milberg?
Yeah, again, just to remind the public that are on traditional telephones, if you press *9 on your keypad, we will be alerted that you would like to speak. I'm looking through the list now, Mr. Mayor, and do not see any hands raised at this moment.
Very good. And with that, I will close the public hearing. And we're going to move on to the approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve tonight. First is the budget study session of May 19th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Very good. Any questions? Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Page 8 on the May 19th minutes, under the Planning Commission section at the bottom, it states that I said that Planning Commission questioned the ethics of the companies providing those services. I think the word I used was efficacy. Probably an incorrect usage. I looked it up. It probably should have said effectiveness, but efficacy and effectiveness mean the same thing. I did not question the ethics, so I would like that revised, please.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Yes, on page 10, under my comment, Deputy Mayor Resnick echoed Councilman Behrman's comments regarding the habitat. He walked the Wixom habitat recently and stated it needed replacement, for it was a safety concern. The "it" that I was referring to was the platform section at the end extended out over the water, which we had a lot of discussion on in that session.
Okay, thank you.
Any other corrections, additions, deletions? All right, can I, we have a approval for a second, a motion and a second to approve the budget study sessions of May 19, 2020 with added corrections. Roll call. Vote,
Mayor
please.
Mayor
Yes.
Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes?
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gotchall,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
Aye.
7 yes.
Very good. Next up is the approval of minutes for the budget study session of May 20th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Or
Any corrections, additions, deletions on this one? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to approve the budget study session of May 20, 2020. Roll call vote, please.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes?
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gotchall,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
aye.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes,
7 yes.
thank you. And last up on the approval of minutes is the approval of minutes for the regular city council meeting of May 26, 2020. Motion
So moved.
Or
or any additions, corrections, deletions? Another roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gotchall,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
Aye.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes,
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes?
7 yes.
thank you. We have no correspondence, which leads us to the first call to the public. The rules to the call to the public are as follows. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence. And again, immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reasoning for addressing the council. And all councils made by the public shall be made directly to the council. And again, since this is an electronic Zoom meeting, if you're a member of the audience and would like to ask a question, you can either do *9 on your telephone or use the raised hand feature on your computer. Do we have any at this time? Mr. Milburn.
We do not see any of the callers raising their hand. Again, caller *9 if you'd like to speak. As I look through the list, I see no virtual hands raised at this point.
Very good, thank you. I'll close the first call to the public and move on to city manager's report. The fire monthly report of April 2020. Do we have any questions? Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Maybe just a comment here, but the, as you see during the month, the heighten of the stay home, stay safe order from the governor, motor vehicle accidents were 1 compared to the previous year of 14. So people were off the roads, the traffic was lighter, and it follows any of the other statistics I've seen from the insurance industry and other motor vehicle industry publications. So.
Any other questions? All right, next up is the police monthly report of April 2020. Any questions? All right. Next up is the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the city council, will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the council member so requests, in which event the items will be removed from the consent agenda and added to the regular agenda at the end of unfinished business. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Or
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Gotchall,
Yes.
Councilmember Gremlin Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
Aye.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes.
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to unfinished business. We have one item under unfinished business tonight, and that is the recommendation to approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget and adoption of requisite budget resolutions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Support? Very good. Questions? Councilmember Gacho.
Thank you. I just want to, I guess, reiterate that I'm not in favor of switching the economic development director position to an assistant city manager role, for fear of losing out on opportunities essentially that the city needs. We still have a lot of opportunity and growth as a city, with regards to economic development for the future. And I know it's one thing to say that we're not going to bog down the new person with administrative tasks, but in practice that might change, and that's my fear with this. I'm also not in favor again of the pathway around the city hall campus, as I wasn't, I believe, last year when this came up. So primarily for those two reasons, I'm not in favor of this budget tonight. Thank you.
Good. Any other comments, questions? All right, I've got a motion and then a second to approve the recommendation to approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget and adoption of the requisite budget resolutions. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Gremlin Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
Aye.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes.
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gacho,
No.
6 yes, 1 no.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to do business number 1 is a recommendation to approve a professional service agreement for website maintenance, hosting and licensing services with Granicus of St. Paul, Minnesota, with a first-year annual cost of $8,157.14 and funding allocated from account number 101-228-728.284. Website support for a term of up to 5 years, and authorize Mayor Patrick Beagle to sign the renewal for agreement. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Support.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Yeah, one of the things I noticed in the agreement is that this will be hosted in the cloud, right? And therefore, it's going to be somebody else's responsibility per se from a maintenance standpoint. Whereas our IT professional contract has SLAs or service level agreements as to response. I didn't see any SLAs included in this contract. And that would be what happens if the website crashes. People are trying to sign up for an event and 50,000 people decide to try to sign up for it at the same time and the site crashes. I read through it a couple times looking for an SLA for what the response time would be. And it might be something worth looking at to make sure an SLA is in there. On the next contract, you'll notice it is in there, and 24 hours for certain events and 48 hours for other events. So just an observation.
I'll check into the SLA aspect of things. I do know experience-wise, when we've had outages with the website, which has happened very infrequently, it's been very prompt in the attention, but we'll make sure we get something, some sort of a representation of what the turnaround time is on that. I'll check into it.
Councilmember Gacho?
Thank you. If we were to switch providers here, would we have to rebuild the site, or do we just need to then find a different host and we're good to go?
No, we'd have to rebuild it. It's a software as a service kind of a service here where they provide the body of the website. And it's pretty proprietary, I think, at the Granicus end. So there, even if there was some sort of an opportunity by way of the agreement to carry it forward, we couldn't. But typically that is always going to be the case. If we switch providers, you're going to have to rebuild the website, and that'd be something we'd have to factor into the timing and make sure that we bid it out in a time frame that would allow us the ability to complete all that work that would be required to do that rebuild with any new provider we do, or if we chose to do it in-house, which frankly is another opportunity. There's lots of similar service packages, software packages that I've used in other places that I've worked in administration where you can do that work yourself. Pros and cons to it: you get to control the information more readily. You get to not be dependent on somebody else for any of the changes, as we are with some of the website content with Granicus. There are things that we can't change. Most of it we can, but not all of it we can. So if we were to do that ourselves, we'd have control over it. The bad side is you would have full responsibility for all those things, like Deputy Mayor Resnick was talking about, service outages. It would be your problem to see if there was something that happened somehow through the service provider, the software, which is going to be a little less robust in terms of your protections than you would get with a contract with somebody. So there are pros and cons to it. There's different ways to do it, but in the end, if we were to switch to a new provider, we'd have to rebuild the website. Yes.
Okay. I guess toward the end of this contract, I would like to see this bid out or look into the option of designing and then just hosting through someone else. The cost seems to be a little bit high. And I know there's other government host services out there. So I just want to make sure we're staying competitive. Thank you.
Yeah, and just a quick comment, if I can, Mayor, the original agreement that was provided to us, the original master subscription agreement, MSA, in this case, a subscription agreement, didn't have some content in it that I wanted. And one of the things that we got negotiated into the content was an out without cause with 90 days notice. So we have the option to do a bid process and make a move if we decide there's a better pricing opportunity or a better price value combination for us, though we have been pretty happy with Granicus up to this point.
Councilmember Smiley.
I hope we're happy with them for, $8,000-9,000 a year. I tend to agree. It seems like an awful, a high amount for, for what looks like, pretty standard services that we receive. Software updates, tech support. I wanted to know, do we, they give us this access to training webinars and on-demand video library. Is anybody using that?
Yeah, that's something we need to, we would have to look at taking it more advantage of and have some interactions with them. And we are, as I mentioned in the report to the package in this particular council meeting, they are going through or we are exercising our right to get a refresh of our website currently, and that's something that we can bring up during those discussions. How can we take better advantage of some of these other options that we don't currently use, and if they make sense for us? So that's something we're going to be pursuing as we go through this rebuild, or refresh, I should say.
Okay. Also on this list is, disaster recovery. That may cover, Deputy Mayor Resnick's concern. They're not calling it SLA, but again, it's standard that they're backing things up and can recover it. And then I guess I'm not concerned, but I don't like that the site is proprietary. We should be able to get a website built that we can take over or move on to somebody else with it, if we want to. And that's not unheard of either. If we do get, I'd like to have us take a look at another provider for this sooner rather than later, but however it fits.
Right.
Shoot, I had one other thing and I've lost it, but that's the sentiment. That's my sentiment for now. So thanks.
Councilmember Berman.
I would just add that I feel like every couple years I am redoing my law firm's website, and I can tell you this is a very reasonable proposal for a website to be managed and updated. I spend a lot more than this on my law firm's website. Now, granted, I'm attracting business to it, but I feel like this number is in line with proposals I've seen from other companies myself. If we can find a better deal, so be it. But I have no concern with the cost in this website, especially if it's doing what we want it to do. When I was educating myself for the budget, I was looking at some of our surrounding communities' budgets on their websites, and I can tell you our website is above and beyond most of our surrounding communities' websites. So I'm happy with the way it is, and I don't believe that this price is out of line from what I've seen.
Good. Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Hey, just to add on to the comment, $8,100 for an annual is extremely reasonable. I spend multiples of that for some of my websites, and it doesn't have the reach and the breadth and the service that our website does to a community of 14,000 residents. So very reasonable cost, $700 a month. Some of you probably pay close to half that for your cable service and added cell phone with it, so very reasonable price. Again, the disaster recovery is understood, but an SLA would be appreciated in there.
We'll check into it, sir.
Very good.
Any other questions, comments? All right, seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve a professional services agreement for website maintenance, hosting, and licensing services with Granicus of St. Paul, Minnesota, with a first-year annual cost of $8,157.14, with funding allocated from account number 101-228-728.284, website support, for a term of up to 5 years, and authorize Mayor Patrick Beal to sign the renewal agreement. Can I have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
I,
Mayor Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes.
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gacho,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlin Fox,
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you. New business item number 2 is a recommendation to approve a 1-year professional services agreement for information technology support services with BPI Information Systems of Southfield, Michigan, at an annual cost of $6,042, with funding allocated from account number 101-228-801.282, IT support, and authorize Mayor Patrick Beagle to sign the renewal agreement. Do I have a motion?
so moved.
Support?
Your Honor, I have a correction to make on that. I apologize. The 6,042 is actually the monthly cost. So if you want to convert that to an annual cost, it's 72,504. My mistake on that. I apologize.
All right, what we'll just do is we'll correct that to recommendation to approve a 1-year professional service agreement for information technology support service with the BPI Information System of Southfield, Michigan, at a monthly cost of $6,042, with funding from the account number stated. And who made the motion for that?
I think I did.
You want to make another motion to approve that with corrections?
Or you can go the annual, whatever you prefer.
No, I'm fine with the corrections. So
Okay,
moved.
then same with the second?
I don't know who did that one.
I came in at the same time, so you can put me down as a second.
All right, we'll do that.
Thank
Any
you.
questions? Councilmember Cacho.
Thank you. Just again, with the professional services agreement and not bidding now, I know it doesn't require it, but we've been asking about another professional services agreement lately, and now we're kind of up for 2 tonight that weren't bid out. So it's just, I feel like we've fallen into this pattern where we're trying to avoid setting out bids whenever we can, And I don't think that's in good spirit competitively for trying to reduce costs for us. I think it would have been a perfect opportunity with the virus going on. A few years ago, I had mentioned doing virtual pre-bid meetings instead of requiring vendors to turn up in person for everything if they're not doing a site visit to a park or a building or something. There's no reason we can't get everybody on a Zoom meeting or what have you and do a virtual pre-bid meeting and see what we can get in. I know BPI was not the cheapest when we had the bids last time, but we used some other grading factors and had our auditor involved, and we decided to go with them, and they've done a good job. But I just think from a standpoint, we can't keep not bidding things out. It's not efficient.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Berman.
I would echo the thoughts on, this being a $70,000 contract, that this is probably a dollar figure that we should be making sure we're getting a good value for. I'm not necessarily sure that I would agree that every contract needs to be bid out. An $8,000 contract, if the staff is comfortable with it, I feel like I can be comfortable with it. But when we start getting to these contracts, over 50,000, hundreds of thousands plus, I definitely do believe we need to be looking at making sure that we're getting a good return on our investment. And perhaps maybe some feedback from the city manager on that particular issue with this contract. Are we happy with this provider? Do we believe this is the best price we can get, or is that something we need to take a further look at?
Yeah, so the idea of a professional services contract is left open for these kind of reasons by the city charter, right? It's not required to have competitive solicitation because it's a professional services contract. The idea behind that is because there's certain services that are critical part of everyday operations. I would advocate that this is one of them. I would also state that I've had anecdotal feedback only because I wasn't here for the prior contractor, but the world is greatly improved under this contractor by all testimony that I've received from multiple people at the city who were there when we had prior service providers. I do agree with the need to go out for bid on services, and this is not the type of contract that I would advocate not going out for bid for a very long period of time. However, we're under we had a 3-year contract with a 1-year option to renew, which is inside of 5 years, and 5 years is a reasonable period of time for a professional services contract relationship in my estimation. So that's why I decided to proceed with the renewal. Again, it is written in such a way that the city's not committed beyond a 1-year time horizon, so we have the opportunity to address it pretty quickly. And I would anticipate that we would address it pretty quickly just to go out for bid to do our due diligence on it. But 5 years is kind of what I would normally expect on a professional services kind of a contract on this. So that's why I decided to extend it for at least the 1 additional year before we go out for bid. But we have the option to do that at any time under the terms of the contract. And it's also set to expire on an annual basis, so it doesn't have any kind of automatic renewal for any period of time. So it's up for bid essentially again within a year or whenever we decide that we want to move on. But that's something I would expect to see some activity on pretty quickly. But I thought 5 years was a reasonable period, so we went for the additional year at least.
Good. Any other questions? Seeing none, I've got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve a 1-year professional services agreement for information technology support services with BPI Information Systems of Southfield, Michigan at a monthly cost of $6,042 with funding allocated from account number 101-228-801.282 IT support, and authorize Mayor Patrick Legal to sign the renewal agreement. Can I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Smiley,
Aye.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes.
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gotcho,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
7 yes.
Thank you. New business item number 3 is a recommendation to award the bid for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, HVAC, maintenance, and inspection of municipal buildings to VNC 10 Air HVAC Systems Incorporated of Milford, Michigan, for 3 years and an annual amount of $2,841.25 with an option to renewal for 2 additional years. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Support?
Support.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the recommendations that came out of CDC in the light of COVID was in all public buildings that the economizers be adjusted so that more outside air is drawn in. I just want to make sure that that we take a look at that this summer. I don't know if it will come under the old contract, which runs through June or whatever, right? Or this one, but make sure that we take a look at that. And it was in the CDC guidelines for buildings.
Thank you. Any other questions? Tim, this includes the fire department and the DPW building, correct?
It does, yes.
All right, very good. Seeing no other questions, I've got a motion and a support to approve the recommendation to award the bid for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning HVAC maintenance and inspection of municipal buildings to BNC 10 Air HVAC Systems Incorporated of Milford, Michigan for 3 years at an annual amount of $2,841.25 with the option to renew for 2 additional years. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Yes?
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gotchall,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlund Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley,
Aye.
7 yes.
Thank you. Next up is the second call to the public. I will not read the rules of call to the public again, with the exception of if you're audience member and you're using a cell phone, please use your *9 and that'll activate a raised hand feature. And if you're on a computer, use the raised hand option on your computer to have a comment or question. Yep.
And we do have a caller that has raised their hands, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Again, caller, please state your name and address for the record. I will unmute you. Your last 4 digits of your phone number are 8428. Go ahead, caller.
Good evening, Council. My name is Bill Campbell. I live at 3225 Potter Road. I'd like to discuss specifically Potter Road and the speeding and the amount of traffic and trucks tonight, especially during the time of COVID.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sorry. On June 11th in 2018, the entire community lost a young life. Actually, it was a few yards from our home. July 15th, 2019, we initiated our safety officer in the area, thankfully. Over the last year, I'd like to thank Director of Public Safety and Police Chief, Mr. Moore, for taking all my calls and my many emails and our home surveillance videos of vehicles flying down the street of Potter. Unfortunately, many of the same local cars still speed over 50 to 60 miles an hour. I can share dozens of videos and plate numbers from our system. Many cars go so fast I can't even capture the plate numbers. I'll make all these videos available on our Google Drive so Council and the Mayor can review these if you guys wish to. This is not a reflection on Mr. Moore. He's been very helpful and professional. Frankly, drivers just don't use Potter as a residential road. They use it as an expressway. Over the last 7 months, I've personally seen 2 accidents on Potter, and I've captured those, especially what's a major contributor to the problem on Potter is the 50 mile an hour on Wixom Road. During rush hour and morning rush hour and even during the day, Wixom backs up and Potter is used as a shortcut. They still think that Potter is 50 miles an hour just like it is on Wixom Road. I've experienced many times, and so has my neighbors. I think she even was rear-ended last year pulling into our own driveways. People pass on the shoulder, honk their horns, and do other obscene gestures. So I have some suggestions. I know the world has changed and everything is constrained by what's going on. But I thought we could at least get, once the safety officer comes back online, at least get him on the road for a month, all day. He can even use my driveway. I think fines, if it's even legally possible, to be doubled. I think we need more speed limit signs on Potter. There's only a few. I actually saw a solar radar sign in Westland on Central City Parkway. I have a picture of that. That'd be a nice thing to implement in the next budget or in a budget amendment. And I really think Wixom Road needs that speed limit dropped to 45, especially with that new sub over there. So again, many of our residents on the street who I personally talk to feel something needs more to be done. We'd like your help, and thank you for listening to me and allowing me to speak. And I look forward to hearing your comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like, forward the information on a Google Drive to the Public Safety Director Moore, and if a council member wants to see it, we can forward it from there. And then we do have some portable speed limit signs that are out throughout the city, and we will talk to Public Safety Director Moore, and we'll have him put one of those signs up on Potter Road. And thanks for your diligence, and we'll continue once we get going. We'll get back with the full-time officer and we'll start patrolling again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have any other participation from the audience tonight, Mr. Milburn?
I see no other virtual hands raised at this point, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I will close the second call to the public and move on to city manager's comments. City Manager Brown.
Yeah, so a couple of things that were on the city manager update. Number one, we're getting some support from Oakland County on providing personal protective equipment for businesses. There's been a distribution that's taken place to the DDA-based businesses, and we've received additional supplies to provide for businesses outside of the DDA area as well, and that will be worked out in the coming days to get those distributed as well. So we're appreciative of the support from Oakland County on that front. Secondly, also on the personal protective equipment front, we had a distribution that was made possible through the kickoff of it by a local businessman by the name of Eddie Osman, Marathon gas station on Wixom Road, that contributed various pieces of personal protective equipment and other things for senior citizens in the city. We worked with our senior coordinator, Kaylin McMahon, to effectuate a distribution of those items. We received a lot of support also from Carrie West of Care Patrol, as well as other people that decided to get generous and provide some additional content for that distribution, and that was handled as well. And we had a lot of participation from seniors and lots of appreciative comments from them. So I wanted to thank everybody that was involved there, including the staff that's worked hard to promote and coordinate those distributions. We had Laura Cloutier, our DDA executive director, newly hired, that participated and coordinated the first one. And then a variety of employees were involved with the second one with the seniors, including Kaylin and Cheryl Lucas in our office, as well as the mayor. So I wanted to make sure that we made mention of that and say how much we appreciate that and how much the residents appreciated it. Other than that, if there's anything that's on anybody's mind, I'd be happy to try to address any questions or comments. Thanks.
We'll move on to council members' comments. Council Member Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple comments. First of all, it's been a difficult week for our police chief and public safety director, Ron Moore. My heartfelt condolences to him and his family at the passing of his father. I also like to make a short statement in support to all of our policemen and women. I list Chief Moore and all of our officers that serve and protect our community as some of the finest people you'll ever know. And I ask the good Lord to guide them, protect them, and to give them strength. Amen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Gotcho.
Thank you. I also wanted to share my thoughts and condolences with Public Safety Director Moore and his family with their loss. That is all I had tonight. Thank you.
Very good. Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One, I wanted to thank Marilyn and Steve Brown for guiding me especially, but us through the budget process. I thought it went relatively painlessly, and it was time well spent that we all got to speak our minds and have adjustments made, and that I can confidently speak to my constituents and our constituents about the process and the rigor through which we went. So thank you to Marilyn and Steve for that. Also wanted to thank DPW Director Sikma and Steve again for setting it up. But I was fortunate enough to get a tour of the DPW facilities yesterday, and it was quite eye-opening. As Director Sikma said, there's things you can't unsee when you walk through the sludge pit in there. So very beneficial for me, and anyone who hasn't been through there should try to get in. So and also my condolences to Public Safety Director Moore on the loss of his father. That is all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, also condolences to our police chief, Ron Moore. I also like to echo the thanks to our business members in the community that contributed the personal protection equipment. The budget process, everyone warned me that was going to be the most intense time being on council. Thank you for everyone who took the time with me on the phone to explain the budget through me, members on this call and other people. I appreciate everyone who helped me understand the budget and learn the budget and participate in the process. And quite frankly, I think the process went very smoothly, with the exception of the hour we spent on the boardwalk. Lastly, just quickly for Tim, this winter, I mentioned that the barricade by the railroad tracks had been hit by a snowplow. I did notice the other day that when I was out walking my children, that still hasn't been fixed and reattached. If we could get at least reattached prior to it being knocked off the concrete median, I think that would be helpful and hopefully prevent us having to replace it.
Yes, we can take care of that.
Very good. Councilmember Grenlund Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to also send my condolences to Ron Moore and his family, and I echo all the other comments already made by council. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also thoughts and prayers, myself and my family go out to Public Safety Director Moore and the loss of his father. And I want to say that I empathize with the gentleman from Potter Road. I also made the observation because I'm walking 2 or 3 times a day. My dog hates me now because I think she's 10 pounds lighter, but there has been an increase in speed, both commercial and residential traffic on these roads. This morning I saw a complete ignorance of the speed limit sign, the electronic one that was on Charms Road, and people were doing routinely 42 to 46. Just completely oblivious to it. So that was very disconcerting because I think when they initially got installed at these various places, they were adhered to and looked at. I don't know if it is because of the lower traffic volumes, people are going a lot faster. So I'm looking forward as well to increased traffic safety once things turn back on here. Thank you to Marilyn, department heads, Steve on the budget session. After this being my 10th or 11th, I lost count, but doing it virtually did work. We still had the intense discussions and covered all the points. And again, thank you to all of you. I read with great disappointment last week on the decision by the Council of Walled Lake to drop out of the trailway agreement. And I do stand by my comment that one of the greatest assets to any of these communities through this COVID crisis has been its trailways and its parks. When you see the amount of people, hundreds of people on that trailway, thank God it was finished in time for the crisis. And there's no greater asset, and what an asset it'll be once businesses start reopening along the corridor. So again, disappointed, but it will go on, and we'll get phase 2 in, and it'll be great. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome. Yeah, and for myself and my family, our condolences go to Public Safety Director Moore and the loss of his father at this time. And I would like to thank City Manager Brown and Marilyn and all the department on the budget. I had a lot of apprehensions on this year's budget being a virtual budget, and we got all our discussions in. It was very good. I was very pleased with the way things went. Councilmember Berman, just wait till next year when the wing club truck comes up. You don't like those hour about discussions on things, but and then with that, also, you know, on the 2 giveaways that we had with the PPE, one with the DDA through the county and the other through the coordination of Kayla McMahon and the Wixom seniors. I participated in both of those, and everyone was very pleased and couldn't thank us enough, especially the seniors, for thinking of them and getting those pieces of protection or equipment out to them. So I want to thank Oakland County for the businesses. And then we had Kerry West of Care Patrol, Eddie Osmond of Wixom Food and More Gas Station, Charlie Alum of Magnum Towing, Zaya Daly of Comfort Care of Western Oakland County, Cheryl Shuby of Client Care at Synergy Home Care, and Brian Neal of First of Maine and Commerce. Without their help and support, we couldn't have got those done. Like I said, it was a hit. The seniors really loved it. They were excited, and I think they also just liked the fact that they were in their car and could come by and stop and talk to somebody for a couple of minutes. So I think that was a big thing too. So I'm pleased with that. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Or
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, everybody have a good night, and hopefully these Zoom meetings have been fun, but hopefully this was the last Zoom meeting, and the next time we'll be meeting in public. We may even have to take this off break. Thanks.
adios.
Thank you. Sounds good as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Back to wearing.
I just have to let YouTube wind down here.